All right. My apologies, everybody. We're getting this started a second time because the audio cut out on me. So let me know if this is not working again. Just please in the chat, everybody, as you hop in here, let me know if you're getting the audio. Looked like it started last time and then dipped out. I don't know what happened there. And the problem is once I get started, I have not been able to find a good way to change my audio input or like anything like that. So my apologies. I have no idea. That's happened before, and the only thing that I had to do is just start over. So those of you who were here with me for the first like 3 minutes or so, you're going to get a little repeat here. But basically, what we have is a wild Pac-12 news cycle right now. Let me lay it all out for you. Like simultaneously, we've had reports that Oregon is talking to the Big Ten, and that was a pretty credible report. We have also had reports that not a report, more of a prediction from Brett McMurphy that the Big Ten is absolutely going to wind up with four teams from the Pac-12 eventually, and that the Big 12 will get the four corner schools. So there's another thing that has happened here. We also have had John Wilner speculating about the possibility still existing of the Pac-12 raiding the Big 12 and whether or not the grant of rights and exit fees would apply there, the legalities of all of that. That has all been happening since I've been gone, and really most of it has heated up in the last 48 hours or so. So there is a ton on the table here. We have a response from Pac-12 country. John Wilner wrote an article that I actually, in general, agree with, that I'm not sure a ton has really changed with the Pac-12's actual position in the world here in the last couple of weeks. But what is really mattering is the fact that they're getting drugged through the mud continuously by different news cycles. And just every day, it is something new that is negative for the Pac-12. By the way, the other thing I forgot to mention there, an ESPN exec did a podcast and said just said it like common knowledge. Everybody knows the Pac-12 is going to expand. So we have that simultaneously going on as well. I guess that would be one thing that's not a terrible news cycle for the Pac-12. That one's not necessarily bad. And the way it was said with such conviction and where it came from certainly gives me, it gets my attention. It gets my attention in terms of Pac-12 expansion. So we have all of that to break down, but that is, I feel like, barely even scratching the surface of everything that we have going on today. Let me just scroll through my outline. Oh my goodness, how did I not start with this? I meant to start with this before I even got into the Pac-12 situation. Guys, it is a very important day today. I'm not sure if you all realize exactly how important of a day today is. If you're on Twitter, you probably did see this earlier today, but let me be the first, and hopefully not the only, to wish you and yours a very happy Allianceversary. That's right. Today is the 1-year Allianceversary. Let's all, nice round of applause, golf clap, if you will, for the Alliance. 1 year ago today, the Alliance was formed. That became a thing. I see R Webb getting in there. Happy Alliance anniversary, B. Izzo. Exactly. I'm sure Brett Yormark is celebrating the Alliance anniversary, the Allianceversary, if you will, today as well. Calico Willie, what's up, man? I know that you are too. Thank you for the donation. Hi, John. Good to have you back. Hope vacay was good. Vacay was awesome. I can tell you a little bit about that here in a second too, but not before I tell you how I spent my day celebrating the Allianceversary, okay? This is the only way you can celebrate the Allianceversary, in my opinion. I think we should start this as a tradition across college football. Everybody, on Allianceversary, August 24th, everybody needs to take themselves out to the local Chili's. Make sure that, load up on whatever it is that you want. I would prefer chips and salsa, some margs, maybe like one of those awesome blossom things if they still have those. And then you got to get a napkin. Okay. Make sure that you have a napkin and you can just sign it. You can do pen and sign it normally. I actually prefer, though, to take a blood oath on the napkin. You get you and a couple of buddies. Actually, not even a couple of buddies. You need this Chili's trip to be with a couple of acquaintances, not your friends. Make sure they're just acquaintances, maybe business colleagues, people that you know, but don't really know. And you're going to put all your trust in them by signing a blood oath on the back of a Chili's napkin. Just cut yourself open a little bit and then let it bleed out and say, like, hey, we're committed to each other forever. This is great. Our academics are excellent. We have great education. And we see the world very much the same through the same lens. We will never betray each other, literally never betray each other, especially not within the first year of said blood oath. And that, my friends, is how you celebrate the Allianceversary. So I hope that all of you were able to do so with your loved ones today. It is an important day to be with your loved ones, to celebrate all the great that came out of the Alliance and all the commitment and everything that means, everything that it stands for in college football. We have this problem. There's no loyalty, right? I hear it all the time. These kids have no loyalty. They'll decommit on the spot. They can transfer at the first sign of anything going wrong. It's just, the kids these days, no commitment at all. Well, we know that the adults in the room can absolutely make that commitment thanks to 1 year ago today, the Alliance. That proved that the problem with commitment in college football really is simply the kids. It is not the adults. The adults can all make commitments and stick to them. So the Alliance, thank you for reminding us about that. And thank you for being here for us on August 24th. Let's go ahead and add it to your calendar. I see Joe says that he has already added to his calendar. So make sure if you could all just do it right now. I'll even give you a second just to take a break, take a little pause here while I set up the rest of the outline. If you could go into Google Calendar, Outlook, whatever it is that you're using, and just make sure that you mark that down. You can set it to recurring every single year, so it'll pop up for you. And, maybe send George Kliavkov a little nice tweet or something to remind him about the Alliance and all the importance and the good that came out of it. You can do that. I'm totally open to you doing that. However it is that you want to celebrate, you go ahead and do it. So I'll give you all a second while I run down the rest of the show. I'm glad that I remembered that, man. I apologize that I forgot about that and got into actual business when there was a national holiday to attend to first. That is my fault. My priorities were not in the right place. So my apologies there. Yeah, we're going to get to Brett McMurphy's quote, the latest response from Pac-12 country. John Wilner even speculating still about the Big 12 being poached by the Pac-12. Brett Yormark had an incredible quote about Oklahoma and Texas. Man, I just love this guy the more and more that I hear from him. He was riding a horse this week in Stillwater. They got him on top of that, the horse thing that the cowboy rides around on or whatever. Very well done, by the way, by Oklahoma State for that. Yormark's been making his rounds around the Big 12 and apparently doesn't care much about whenever he gets to Oklahoma and Texas, which is what that quote centers around. We have Burke Magnus, the number 2 at ESPN, who said matter-of-factly, basically, that the Pac-12 is going to expand. We have Stuart Mandel taking on the entire world of college football, it seemed like today, or at least the entire league. He took on the entire Big 12, it felt like, with some wild Big 12 projections for the upcoming season, which I think you guys will all be very interested in. And that is one of those things where it's like, I'm a little conflicted here because he picked K-State to win the Big 12, which is great, but I don't know how much, look, we all have our opinions about Stuart Mandel around here. I don't know how much stock I should be putting into that. He also has Kansas winning 3 conference games and not finishing last. And you won't believe who he has finishing last. And speaking of finishing last in the Big 12 in Stuart Mandel's poll, how about Texas naming a starting quarterback, but doing so in the most Texas way possible? Still seems like things are a mess there. And when I told you the other day that Texas, they may not be under a 5-7 warning, but they're definitely in 5-7 watch territory, I was directly spot on with that based on what I heard about how the quarterback, not like what I heard, based on what we know about how the quarterback selection process went down for Texas, at least how Sark announced it. So all of that's on the table, in addition to whatever it is that you guys have, okay? You know how this works if you've been around here before. On the chat, there's going to be a bunch of people in here. We've already got over 200 people in the chat, despite the hiccup to start things here. It's going to get crowded. I will not be able to get to nearly everything. If you want to make your voice heard, get your question or comment on the show. You can do so by donating. See the chat box where it says say something. You click the $ below that and include your message. It will send me a donation, pin your question or comment up to the top of the chat box. Make sure that I get to it. Supersedes everything else. That is how you control and dictate the content here on the channel. And at the same time, support what I'm doing. Great way to support what I'm doing, bringing you Big 12 content each and every week here on the channel. It is much appreciated as always. And if you want to do something that is free, doesn't cost you a dime, all you have to do is go click that like button. That really helps me out with the YouTube algorithm. That is one thing you can do that does not cost you anything at all to help out and support the channel as well. So I appreciate all of you for being here tonight. With that, let's go. I had a great time out on the West Coast for whoever it was that asked me about my vacation. Had a great time. I think that was Calico, right? That was Calico. Had a great time in Seattle. Downtown Seattle is amazing. I was expecting good things. I was expecting to have a really good time in Seattle, but it blew me away, man. I mean, there is so much to do there. the whole metro area. You want mountains, you want beach, you want waterfront, you want football. I mean, that stadium is like smack dab in the middle of downtown. You want to just hop on the light rail and go out and catch a game at UW. That's very easy to do. It just drops you off, plops you right there. Pike's Place Market's incredible, like just seafood, sushi. Like it was great, man. Enjoyed the hell out of Seattle. Also went to Portland. Portland definitely lived up to the billing as being kind of weird, but it was not. You hear a lot of things about Portland, and I walked around, explored everything that I could. About 36 hours there, had a blast there, and never felt crazy or unsafe or anything like that. So great vacation, good to get away, but happy to be back here with all of you guys and talking a little Big 12 football, some conference realignment, and some crazy Pac-12 storylines. Okay, let's get after it. Michael, next out of the chute with a donation here. Michael, thank you. And thank you for being here. He says, Utah to the Big 12. Any chance we get San Diego State for a whole new market instead? Utah to the Mountain West Conference. Who says no? I think that's actually that's a possibility. Okay, that's at least a possibility. I would not put that as like the betting favorite that's where Utah is going to wind up ultimately. But there is some level of danger for them in that I think at least in them not making the cut, if you want to put it that way, the cut into the Big 12. Because San Diego State does. I mean, it provides you the Southern Cal TV market. We've seen now that LA, there was even one, I'm trying to remember which report, which projection it was I read this week, where potentially UCLA actually was a dilutive ad for the Big Ten. Like that may have actually cut down on the amount of money per school by the fact that they were even included in that with USC. And the only reason they were is because it's just further cornering that Southern California market, even if UCLA is not a big draw. So it emphasizes the value of getting in there. You guys have heard me say this before. There is definite value in getting even just a little tiny piece of that in San Diego if you are the Big 12. It's also a school that can definitely compete. Okay, probably not at the level of Utah, which has basically been running the Pac-12, it feels like already here lately, and went to the Rose Bowl last year. But they can be a solid team and get you into a market that you're not in at all, and second biggest market in the country. Whereas Utah, not in a particularly big market, and it's already a market that you have control of, or at least a major foothold in by virtue of BYU being there. And that's a bigger national brand anyway. So like, as cocky as Utah fans want to be, and I mean, I continue to see them projected in the top 4 this year, projected to, by some, go to the college football playoff this year. Cocky as they might want to be about that, we know it is not a meritocracy in college football, unfortunately. And when you talk about brand and the way that things could break here, if Brett McMurphy's scenario does play out with the Pac-12, they fall apart and the Big 12's in the market for 4 new schools, it could be the other 3-4 corner schools and San Diego State. So yes, I think there's a chance. I'm not sure that I would say like that's the most likely outcome by any stretch of the imagination, but I think that is at least within the realm of possibility. You can lay me out a scenario where that does happen, and I don't think it takes anything totally crazy to happen. It would just take the dominoes to all fall in place. Bam, 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 bam. But I don't know what Brett Yormark thinks about Utah. I do not know that. Zach, thank you for the donation. Zach says, give us your predictions for how future Big 12 teams, Cincy, Houston, and UCF will do in their last AAC seasons. Who wins the conference between the 3 and who misses out on even being in the title game? Well, I like, Zach, that you set it up the way that you did, saying who out of the 3 wins the conference, because I do think that it is going to it's going to be one of those 3 teams. I was actually on the plane ride. I think it was the plane ride there on vacation, doing a little bit of reading on the AAC. It's a tough one for me. I kind of look, here's the danger for me. I'll just be honest. And keep in mind, AAC fans, I am new to getting in down and dirty with your teams here. I do not have, again, I try to always be really honest with you here on this channel. Like, I do not have years of experience covering these teams, knowing the nuances, the ins and outs of the league. I just know what I've been able to read and put together here about these teams specifically for this year. To me, the best bet on paper would be Houston in terms of like roster, what they have coming back. I tend to lean Houston because of that. However, I love the championship medal that Cincy has. And obviously UCF still has championship DNA all over the place in Orlando with what they've been able to do over the last 5 to 10 years in college football. So it's hard for me to ignore basically the pedigree of Cincinnati and UCF. But I think like on paper, Houston would be the favorite. So that's where I'm at on all of this right now. And you can go crazy, hold me to it. I saw people say like, oh, pitchforks for coming after Stuart Mandel today for his predictions. So I'm not like crazy about just doing straight up, like I'm going to say prediction radio because I used to do a radio show. I'm obviously not doing radio anymore, but just like prediction show, I much more like to react and give you my opinion, my take, but not just straight up like predictions. That's just a losing business. There's a reason why, like if you predict 53% of games correct, basically against the spread, you're going to make a lot of money in Vegas. It's not a winning game. It's not a winning proposition. So I don't love doing that, but that would be my lean right now, with the utmost respect to the other two schools there. And I really don't, I have a hard time seeing any sort of real legitimate challenger outside of those three for the AAC title game. There seems to be, the other thing is that there's a lot of momentum for these schools right now because of the fact that they're going into the Big 12. And I think there's going to be added momentum to try and parlay your final year into the AAC into a big jump into that conference and more momentum coming into the league. I just think the stakes are pretty high for those schools right now, and they're feeling how much momentum they have in the grand scheme of things at the moment. So there's probably a heightened sense of want to there. And honestly, man, Cincinnati, this is a big year for Fickle and company if they really want to prove something. Last year they proved a lot by making the college football playoff. But now, they lose Desmond Ridder. They lose all those draft picks. Had an incredible draft. If they can come back and win the AAC once again this year, okay, we're talking about proving like even more staying power than they already really have as a program and as a program under Fickle specifically. So, and then for UCF, last year was crazy with injuries. Totally get that. The Dylan Gabriel situation wasn't great. They've been recruiting like crazy. I definitely love Gus Malzahn and think he's a very good coach and a good fit there. So they're not going away. They're definitely not going away. I think I just need to see some things fall in place for UCF as far as how they rebound from what all they had to deal with last year before I totally buy in on them being the pick to win the league. But it would not shock me at all, man. Would not shock me in the slightest if either one of those three teams won the league. So that's the best I can give you there, I think, on the AAC right now in those three schools. Okay. McMuffin. What a name. Thank you, McMuffin, for being in here in the chat tonight. McMuffin says, hey, John, it has come to my attention that this community has a sizable Red Raider audience. I would like to make it known that I am, for one, a fan of the fifth best football school in the state. Oh, and Sikkim Bears. Okay. All right, Mick. Mick, is that, I assume, so you're saying you're a Baylor fan, right? Like that, obviously the Sikkim Bears, I get that part, but our fifth best team in the state, I'm sure there's a reference that I'm not getting there. I saw somebody ranking Texas schools the other day that had people kind of up in arms. So I apologize that I'm not getting the specific reference there, but assuming that you are a Baylor fan, or I can't tell, am I missing the sarcasm here, guys? And this is actually a Texas Tech fan taking a shot at Baylor. I apologize if I'm looking stupid here because I'm not fully understanding what's happening. But you know what? Go Tech, Sikkim Bears, guns up, whatever. Like you guys both. No issues with either of you. And I think both of your teams will have nice years. Very nice years. So thank you for being here, McMuffin. Thank you for being you, McMuffin, and having a name like that, adding some character to our Big 12 chat here tonight. And Texas Tech, Baylor, BYU, those are some of the bigger representations I feel like we have here on the channel. West Virginia also. And look, I don't want to leave anybody out. I know that there are plenty of you from all across the league here. Thank you for being here. I love your squad unless you're Kansas. Love your squad. Or Texas or Oklahoma. David, what's up, David? Thank you for the donation. David, appreciate it as always. David, why do so many Utah fans think somehow they're on the radar to go to the Big Ten? They've barely been AAU affiliated for 3 years. Well, I can tell you how they think that. It's the same way that Kansas fans have thought that they were legitimately on the Big Ten's radar for a long time. It's the ego that comes along with what your program is and what you're doing at that current moment in the sport, and letting that carry it, thinking that that's the entire picture. Now, sort of apples to oranges, because for Kansas, it's having the best basketball program in the country right now, in essence, and thinking that that translates to the currency of conference realignment, which it does not. Exchange rate's not great on that for the Jayhawks. For Utah, it's like what their football team actually is on the field here at the moment. That is different than what their place is in the college football world based on media market, brand, everything else that really matters there. So it's pretty easy to see how they get there, especially right now. We're close to the season. Hope springs eternal, and there is a lot of publicity positively flowing for this year's Utah squad. So I think that is a piece of it too, that they're in the midst of an offseason, coming out of an offseason with a bunch of excitement for the season. That is, they're getting a lot of hype. So that even fuels it even more. So I get it. Mark, thank you for the donation. Mark, I see message retracted. That's all I see there, Mark. So if you have a message, get it in there. I'll try and find it in the chat. But thank you for the donation. Thank you for being here tonight. If you guys want to join in the chat as well, click the $ below the chat box where it says say something. That is how you get involved, make your voice heard, and dictate where we're going here on the chat tonight. I am going to hop in here and update you on what's been going on with the Pac-12. So we have a lot of things. If we go back to the timeline here, John Wilner actually laid some of this out. He said, first, we had within the last week a report that the Big Ten's contract, their TV contract, when that came out, that it has a huge escalator clause to account for expansion. Okay, so that was one thing. Everybody looked at it and said, I mean, look, their TV contract is already like building in the possibility of expansion here, just further keeping that door open. Then we saw Oregon representatives talking to the Big Ten. That story was reported. Now, Brett McMurphy also said that it was not the president or the athletic director or Kevin Warren that were involved here. But he later clarified in an interview on the Paul Feinbaum show that that is still pretty normal because it's just like early stages of discussions here. Fit, academics, how would this go? And Phil Knight may be pulling a lot of the strings behind this at this point, even if he wasn't totally present for all of this. So it makes sense. And I get it. The Pac-12 response to that was, well, hey, of course, Oregon is having preliminary discussions with the Big Ten. If they weren't, they would be doing themselves a disservice. Don't disagree. Not great publicity to have it out there in a report, though, and get that in the news cycle and just continue to publicly put that out there. That puts pressure on things internally. It puts pressure on Kliavkoff to get everybody to sign on the dotted line, makes it more difficult, makes there a higher probability of difficulties within just members, like infighting within the conference, people being upset about what Oregon is doing or not doing. Like, it's just not good to have that out there publicly. All right. So that was another thing that happened here within the last week. Then we have Brett McMurphy going on the Paul Feinbaum show yesterday. And this is a direct quote from his interview on the Feinbaum show. He said, in regards to the Pac-12, quote, they're going to lose 4 schools to the Big Ten. And then I think 4 schools out of the Pac-12 take a lifeline to go to the Big 12. Direct quote from Brett McMurphy, who, if you'll recall, has been somebody that's reported on this quite a bit. He had the story. It was right after Big Ten Media Days when Kevin Warren left the door open for expansion. Then he had the report of what the list of schools were and that it included the 4, Oregon, Washington, Cal, Stanford from the Big Ten. He included that list of schools there. This is a guy that's been a dogged reporter for a long time, covered the last big round of conference realignment in like 2010, 2011, 2012. Brett McMurphy is somebody to be taken seriously. That is a guy that when he reports something, you listen. When he says something, now this wasn't really a report. This was more a prediction, but based on everything, you know that guy's pretty sourced up and definitely hears a lot. And his opinion was basically, this is bad for college football. I hate it. But here's what's going to happen. The Big Ten is going to take 4 more schools from the Pac-12, and then the 4 corner schools will jump for a lifeline to the Big 12. Very esteemed reporter, guy that's been around for a long time saying that. I would say that there's definitely something to that. And I mean, it really feels like an inevitability at this point. Now, does that answer the question of when it's going to happen? No, it certainly does not. McMurphy did not have an answer as to when exactly that was going to happen. So I get it. If the Pac-12 reaction is going to be, well, did anything really change? No, but again, this is about news cycles, and you want to control the news cycle. You do not want to be constantly washed up in this thing, and that's what's happening right now with the Pac-12. You just heard me rattle off everything, the major headlines that have come in the last week since I've been on vacation. There have been a ton of them, and it's like every day it's something else for the Pac-12 where they have to go back on the defensive. It actually kind of reminded me of being a Big 12 fan, or a year ago when this was happening, still being a reporter in the Big 12, like an actual reporter. And it was like every single day you got to go back out there and defend the latest story, the latest round of stories that are coming up, the latest narrative that is out there. And right now, the narratives are just constantly flowing that the Pac-12 is going to be raided by the Big 10. So, yeah, it's not the Big 12 that is the real existential threat to the Pac-12 right now, although it can deliver the death blow if and when the teams do leave for the Big 10. But right now, the Big Ten is doing nothing at all to try and help out the Pac-12 and get a TV deal signed. Nothing at all to try and just squash some of this for right now. Nothing at all to honor on the Allianceversary, no less. Nothing at all to hold up their end of the bargain, so to speak, with what happened with the alliance. And that feels to me like a fairly deliberate choice, because here's another thing. I forgot about this, actually. There's a Real Sports on HBO Real Sports with Bryant Gumbel. There's a sit-down interview that he did with Kevin Warren, and they leaked some of this as like a teaser beforehand. And Kevin Warren was asked, you're at 16 teams now. Could you foresee 20? And here's what he said. I could. Yeah, I see perpetual and future growth. So there's Kevin Warren's quote again. I mean, that's not even a report. That's not McMurphy giving his opinion. That is Kevin Warren himself coming out on Real Sports on HBO, major show, and just putting it out there. Yes, I see us expanding to 20. Like that's basically what he said. And so every time this happens, it's just keeping that open, keeping that possibility out there. It's like he is completely toying with the Pac-12, man. I mean, it's like if you've had a dog or a cat that goes crazy about the little laser pointer on the wall, I mean, it just feels like Kevin Warren is sitting over in the corner, and whenever he gets bored, he kind of like pops on that laser pointer, starts dancing it around on the wall and making George Kliavkov, who is the dog or the cat in this scenario, just like jump up and start scratching the wall and freak out and look at where the next one's coming. Like, wait, this is Sports Business Journal. There's Brett McMurphy. That's Real Sports. And just like jumping up, trying to combat it every single time and go after it. And all Warren has to do is just hit the little button and it goes away. And he can just continue to mess with Kliavkov in the Pac-12 right there. All the while, Kliavkov is trying to get this TV deal done, which another thing I've continuously said here on the channel is like, we're not going to know anything for certain until we figure out what the Pac-12 TV deal is going to look like. And the big problem, what have I been saying all along? The big problem here, you can say all you want about the Pac-12 TV numbers have been better. Take them out of context, whatever it is that you want to do. They have the late night TV window, but it's always been but how are you going to get everybody to agree to this and sign on? And I feel like that threat was not treated substantially enough by most of the Pac-12 media sources, well-intentioned as they might be. And this is now kind of coming to fruition. We'll see. I mean, maybe Kliavkov is able to get something done. I saw John Canzano wrote recently not to expect anything before Labor Day, so it doesn't sound like anything in the immediate future, like the next week or two, should be expected to come down from the Pac. But I don't know. Maybe he'll shock everybody and come away with some big deal. But right now, I don't see how they're getting that thing signed and getting that thing signed when the Big Ten continues to just flirt, basically just openly flirt with the four schools in the Pac-12. And so it is hard for them to ignore the 10 at the end of the bar flirting with them openly when, you got the longtime girlfriend there, but you're looking across the bar and being like, man, this is the better option. This is new and exciting. If that's even a possibility, that really is what it feels like is going on here. So it's been wild. This is only a portion of what we have that's been going on in the Pac-12 here lately. But again, I just think the Pac-12 is suffering a lot of damage here because of how much they're having to go through and defend themselves at every turn in the news cycle through whatever channels it is, the reporters internally, externally. That's a lot of defense that you have to do. It's a lot of stories that come out that people in the league are going to text each other, talk to each other, call each other about it and be like, what is this? Like, Oregon, you guys are having formal meetings now with the Big Ten. Like, what is that? Brett McMurphy's coming out and saying this. Kevin Warren is still going out and saying this. Like, what is that? Who's looking around? And you can see how this happens. And everybody's opinion right now is not very high of the Pac-12. The Big 12 has dealt with that for years, where the same narratives and storylines get repeated over and over again. Let's take this one, for example. Not even like a realignment off the field thing for the Big 12, but how many times have we heard, even still today in 2022, like, the Pac-12 doesn't play any the Big 12, the Big 12 doesn't play any defense. You go to the Big 12, they're not going to play any defense. These 70 to 63 games. Dude, that 70 to 63 game between West Virginia and Baylor, that was 2013, right? I mean, that was damn near a decade ago that happened. Like, we are far away from that. It's a different league. Oklahoma State played as good a defense as anybody in the country last season. Baylor plays excellent defense. The whole tenor of the league has changed, but that narrative got put out there so many times and was in the news cycle for so long that it just residually stuck with everybody. And I think the Pac-12 is dealing with a similar problem here. And to be honest, look, I don't mean to just go total, I always mispronounce this word. Is it Schadenfreude or whatever? Like taking joy in somebody else's pain here. But when the Pac-12 was doing some grave dancing last year and saying, thanks, but no thanks to the Big 12. And for a decade plus, the Big 12 has been taking all these negative headlines. I mean, yeah, it's pretty entertaining to watch somebody else go through it. Whether or not that's bringing out the worst in me as a human, I'm just being honest. I'm brutally honest to a fault here on this channel, and I'm being honest. It has been somewhat entertaining to watch there. All right, back to your donations. I appreciate all of you that have hopped in here. If you want to get your question or comment on the show, control the content, support what I'm doing here, bringing you Big 12 content regularly, click the $ below the chat box where it says say something. That is how you hop into the chat here tonight, just as Mike has. Mike, appreciate it. Let's see. Mike Pilch says, I'm a former Wisconsin Badger radio network. RE Big Ten Midwest Pop is shrinking. Part of adding West schools is advertising Big Ten universities to other parts of the country. Youth football rates shrinking. So football cash cow, they need to keep the schools in mind. All right. So I'm deciphering a lot of shorthand there, Mike. Very, very generous donation. I appreciate that, kind sir. I get what you're saying here in that, like, hey, the Big Ten wants to ensure that they are extending their reach to the West Coast for reasons beyond just the pure sheer monetary value in the immediate future of the TV value there. It's like, hey, can we advertise this league out on the West Coast? Can we get the West Coast more interested in football? Because we know that there's not as much of an interest in football or sports in general or whatever on the West Coast. I believe that's really what you're getting at there. That like this can be almost like maybe 40 chess is a little bit strong, but it's just thinking beyond playing checkers here, where most people would see this as, oh, checkers. Okay, you're going to add a big brand in USC, but there are deeper roots and deeper meaning to it. I wouldn't disagree with that. I think all of that clearly, based on what we've seen develop here, comes secondarily to the primary, which is just the money grab. And the Big Ten seems as interested in that part of it as anybody. And that's why they're richer than everybody else in college football right now. And why Real Sports called Kevin Warren the most powerful man in college athletics, tied to that story that I mentioned earlier. But yes, there are definitely some residual benefits to that as well. And I mean, I think another part of it too, Mike, is going to be if the Big Ten does add schools there and they don't want, if you're going to make the case, say it's not just all totally about money, maybe you take a little bit of a monetary hit there just to give some extra travel partners for USC and UCLA, make that a little bit more feasible, make it all make more sense, just become a more sensical operation while still adding some pretty good schools, even if they're not going to bring you the type of value, the type of additive value that like a Notre Dame would, for instance. So yeah, I hear you. I think that's a good point, Mike. And I hope I deciphered all that correctly there through what it is that you gave me in the donation. Mark, thank you for the donation. Mark says a 3-win Kansas season, mainly on a Texas loss, would be great to see again. I do understand we were wild with the Big Ten hope. All right, Mark, a Kansas fan in here. All right, Mark, appreciate the self-awareness there. Very much appreciate that, because there does not seem to be a ton of that with a lot, at least the Kansas fans that you hear from on the internet regarding the Big Ten thing, right? I understand. I get it. I get why you'd be excited about it. I get that, like, I've always said, like, there's a chance because Kansas is an AAU program and they are a national brand because of the basketball program. However, we've just seen the value of football increase even more throughout all this with the money being thrown around. And Big Ten basketball is actually, I just was reading about Big Ten basketball coaches being upset because a lot of the games are going to get dumped down to like FS1 and just not be as widely viewable to everybody. If it's on ESPN, you're going to at least be on in every sports bar across the country that'll just have ESPN on a Tuesday night. That changes if you're going to be on FS1, if it's going to be streaming only, that kind of thing. So basketball has actually like lost a little bit of value in the Big Ten. So it just got further away. But I'm all for Kansas beating Texas for the rest of eternity in football. If they could schedule that game out every year after Texas leaves for the SEC, I would love to see Kansas beat them every single year. And Mark, you would love Stuart Mandel's Big 12 projection because he had Kansas finishing in front of Texas in the Big 12 standings and Kansas going 4-8. I believe Texas was also 4-8. Double check that. Yeah, he's got Kansas and Texas at 4-8, but Kansas at 3-6 in the league and Texas at 2-7 in the league. So Stuart Mandel from the Athletics seems to share basically your prediction, or at least your hope there. Maybe the better way to characterize it, Mark. So, hey, you're on to something, dude. You're on to something. And I'm here for Kansas beating Texas. Absolutely here for it. All right, if you want to be like those guys and donate to the channel, support what I'm doing here to bring you Big 12 content, and get your question or comment on the chat, click the $ below the chat box where it says say something. We got about 25 more minutes here. We're a little over halfway through the show here tonight. Also, if you could like the video, I would definitely appreciate that. That is free. Doesn't cost you a dime. I'm not asking you for anything other than one click. That is all it takes. One click to go like the video. We got 600 people in here and 90 likes on the video. Not a great ratio, everybody. I'm just simply asking for a click here to help me out as well. So thank you. Thank you for all of you that are here. I see somebody said smash that like button. That's what you say on YouTube, right? You got to say smash that like button. Here is the response from Pac-12 country to the stories that I laid out, all the negative press, the negative news cycle. Kevin Warren saying that he expects them to get to 20 teams. Brent McMurphy coming out and saying he expects that the Big Ten is going to take 4 and that 4 schools then will leave the Pac-12 for the Big 12. All of that being laid out. The response from John Wilner is this piece. I'm just going to start reading to you from his piece. And to be honest, I don't really totally disagree with him on it. So he said, first came reports that the Big Ten's mammoth new media rights contract includes an escalator clause that carves out hundreds of millions of dollars in case of additional West Coast expansion. Then came a report that Oregon representatives have engaged Big Ten officials in discussions to determine whether the Ducks are compatible with the conference. Both developments help to fuel the narrative, especially on social media, that the Pac-12's so-called 4 corner schools have just one viable option to enter the Big 12 as soon as possible. The resulting portrait depicts a conference on death's door, but the reality is considerably more nuanced. And nuance doesn't exist on Twitter or Facebook, and sports bars are across the public machinery of college football realignment. That's a statement I don't think anybody can really disagree with, right? Twitter does not leave much room for nuance. And as much as I'm a part of this, like the Big 12 Twitter response, whenever we see a Pac-12 storyline or propaganda bit come out, I'm as much a part of it as anybody else and trying to stick up for the Big 12. But it is hard to hit all the nuances of some of this in that scenario. So Wilner is not wrong in saying that. He says, reaction. Sure, university presidents would be naive to ignore any lifeboats on the horizon. So these Pac-12 presidents, he says, would be naive to ignore any lifeboats on the horizon. But that doesn't mean the Big 12 is their preference. In our estimation, all 4 schools want to remain in the reconfigured Pac-12, and exodus would unfold only if they have no reasonable choice. Again, I don't totally disagree with that. I think it is pretty clear that by this point, if they've stuck it out, their preference is going to be to stay in the Pac-12. But most of the time, that's going to be the case. Like if you're Arizona State, you would certainly hope your best case scenario is not having to change a thing, staying where you're at, staying with everybody you're associated with, and making $45 million a year in TV money. If I'm going to throw out a number there, you would prefer to do that than have to uproot everything, change your regional rivalries, travel more to the Big 12, and just completely dislodge yourself from the conference that you've been in now. I'm sure that the preference would be, in an ideal world, in a vacuum, to stay in the Pac-12. But the problem is, like, that's not the real world that they're operating within right now. The world that they're operating within right now is one in which Oregon and Washington, et cetera, may demand unequal revenue sharing. They may not sign anything. Are they only going to sign for like 3 years, 4 years, whatever? Everybody expects them to be gone. There's a different news story every day about instability within their conference. That's not a very fun existence if you have to continually deal with drama. How many of us like continually dealing with drama every single day? You're getting long text messages, bombarded with things. You hop onto Twitter, you hop onto Instagram, and you have to go defend yourself against something else. That gets exhausting after a while. And so I think the idea here would be at a certain point, and again, I think they'll stick it out until they find out whatever a TV offer is going to be. But at a certain point, if the money's not right, you're not getting paid well, you're not getting treated well by your boss, there's drama every day, you got to defend yourself on Slack every single day. Eventually that's going to wear you down, and you're going to say, man, to hell with this. Like, I have somewhere else where I can go that's going to be at least more stable and comparable money-wise. I mean, I think we've all kind of come to that agreement, right? It would be comparable financially. And I think that's the real rub here. And that's where I wouldn't say it's like Wilner and I disagreeing. It's just, again, to get into the nuance of it, it's the nuance of how you actually take that statement and that point that he's making there. Here he addresses the Oregon piece of this. He says Oregon representatives are talking with the Big Ten about compatibility per the Action Network. And his reaction is, of course they are. Any Pac 12 school that hasn't reached out to other conferences is steering directly toward the iceberg. Does anyone believe that Nike founder Phil Knight, the only Oregon representative who truly matters, hasn't reached out to key officials in the Big Ten and SEC about options for his school? Of course he has. Knight knows everybody worth knowing in both leagues. Totally agree. Like everybody's contacting everybody. The Big Ten and the SEC, I'm sure, have been contacted by every single Power Five school in the country. Not from, I mean, the Big Ten and the SEC, probably no crossover there, but everybody else, ACC, Pac 12, Big 12, everybody's reaching out to everybody because you have to. That is a matter of survival. So I get it. But if it's to the point where there are meetings taking place and it's being leaked and, like a more formal actual meeting, that does seem to me to be a step beyond. Like, what have we heard from Kliavkoff when he said he was taking grenades from the Big 12? It was all, we're getting emails and text messages that they're forwarding on to me, right? So again, this is where the nuance of what Wilner says here, I will just brush back against a little bit. If it's being reported by the Action Network and Brett McMurphy that Oregon officials are at least meeting on some preliminary level with Big Ten officials, that's a step further than just texting or emailing. Think about it like this. I feel like I've got analogies for days right now, but those of us that have to use dating apps, which is hell, I hate it. But, you can be talking to a lot of people on the apps, just like messaging there, but it's gone to a different stage when you actually go meet up at a bar for drinks or whatever it is, for coffee. That's a different stage. It doesn't mean that you're going to marry that person. It doesn't mean that you've committed to anything long term, but it is a step beyond simply just talking on the apps. And I think what it feels like here is Kliavkoff himself has been like, look, everybody's trying to come after us on the apps. They're swiping right. They're sending messages, whatever it might be. Hopefully nothing too lewd, Big 12 schools. But Oregon now seems to at least be at the stage where they're on a first date. It seems like a first date kind of stage with the Big Ten. And so that's not great, obviously, when you're trying to get them to commit to a TV contract and maintain stability within your league. So once again, like agree and disagree with Wilner on that point. He goes on to say a report from the Sports Business Journal, it hasn't received nearly as much attention as the escalator clause of the Action Network nugget provides contract details that muddle the financial piece to another round of West Coast expansion. So this came from the Sports Business Journal. And it basically says, I don't know that I need to read you this whole thing. There is an escalator clause. It was like an extra $250 million staked out in the contract in the Big Ten's TV deal. So escalator clause, if they were to expand, there would be an extra $250 million there that the TV contract would provide. Sports Business Journal said that's basically just for Notre Dame. If it's anybody else, there's an agreement that they will have in good faith negotiations, but they're not bound to that extra $250 million. So his thought there is okay, everybody freaked out saying the Big Ten's leaving the door open with this escalator clause, but really that's mainly there for Notre Dame. And again, I would say sure, of course, that's going to be the primary thing. And of course, that's the only way TV networks would agree to some dollar figure to pay out here because they know everybody else is going to be somewhat dilutive. You wouldn't want to agree to $250 extra million for even just Oregon and Washington. You would do it for Notre Dame, not anybody else. Of course, they're going to get the preferential treatment there. But that doesn't mean that the door is not still kind of cracked open because of the fact that there is language in the contract that they would go back to the negotiating table if they do expand. So it's yes and no. No, it's not. I don't think that's a major bombshell. I did not take that to be some major bombshell. To me, that was expected. The Big Ten's in a position of leverage, in a position of power. Of course, they'll build in some language to hey, if we decide to expand, you guys are going to have to do this over again. We'll figure something else out. So I don't think it's some kind of big bombshell, but I also don't think that it's nothing. I don't think that that's purely just about Notre Dame. So that was the Wilner response. If you want to know what Pac-12 country has to say and what they think right now about what's going on with all these different news stories coming out, basically ensuring their demise, everybody being very predictive, presumptuous that they are going to fall apart at some point. That's the defense right now going on in the Pac-12. I think that's valuable to see there. And I don't think any of that, again, is particularly unfair or fanboyish or anything like that from John Wilner, who is a good reporter, very good reporter, excellent reporter. In Pac-12 country, but it does come with a bit of a Pac-12 slant there. So that's where he and I would disagree just a little bit, respectfully, of course, nothing but respect. I have a lot of respect for John Wilner. Speaking of John Bolster, thank you for the donation. He says watching Pac-10 is like watching a slow-mo train wreck. Yeah, I mean, I guess we could probably quibble on the term slow-mo, like how slow it actually is right now. It does. It feels like it goes faster and faster than I expected to continuously as we get further and further along this trail. That we're kind of, I mean, every time a story comes, I'm like, man, I figured this would die down. We're getting close to the season. I figured we wouldn't hear anything for a while, and then something else kicks up that day. So it's almost like feels like it's going faster than you might have anticipated. David, thank you for the donation. David says, he wants to talk some actual football here. David says, why is everybody crowning Oklahoma as Big 12 champs when they are rebuilding a complete coaching staff and many players? I think K-State will be a lot better than what people think. Couldn't agree more, David, on both accounts. I love that take. I love that opinion. You'll love what Stuart Mandel had to say about the Oklahoma Sooners today. How about this? Stuart Mandel has Oklahoma finishing 4th in the Big 12 with a record of 7-5. 7-5. So if you'll remember, Mandel was the one who back in the late spring, and that was maybe like late spring, early summer, had a top 25. I think it was like a post-spring top 25. And he had Oklahoma out of the top 25. And that drew a bunch of headlines at that point. He got OU fans all mad at him. And he just doubled down here with this prediction, having the Sooners at 7-5 this year, which I love, if for nothing else than to just see Oklahoma fans squirm again. I have not seen a fan base go from like the big bad bullies on the block, confident as ever, confident as hell, to insecure to the point of having to stoop to the level of everybody else and just hop all over anybody that says anything negative about them on Twitter at all. Any national writer that doesn't proclaim them to be the greatest, they're going to come after them with pitchforks. And it all stems obviously from the insecurity that came from Lincoln Riley. So I appreciate Mandel for kind of needling and poking and prodding Oklahoma a little bit there. I'll stand by it. I would not pick Oklahoma to win the league right now. I would also not pick them to go 7-5. I feel like Oklahoma's more in the 9-3, 10-2 range, which would leave them very vulnerable to be bested at the top of the league. And I would say that, yeah, Baylor, Oklahoma State, K-State are your biggest contenders there to take them down. Texas, I mean, a month ago, I would have at least thrown Texas a bone and being like, look, they have so much talent on offense. It's overwhelming. I'm open to listening to like maybe they can be competitive there, but not with what's happened with the injuries, losing 2 offensive starters for the year, one of those stud receivers. And then this Quinn Ewers thing, like, I don't know how closely you guys followed all of that, but like there was buzz going around that Ewers was not playing very well in practice. He hadn't actually separated from Hudson Card as the starting quarterback there. And as such, people were kind of freaking out. Like there was scuttlebutt about Texas was not good at that point. And people thought Ewers may not legitimately win this job. So then there's a press conference after that has nothing to do with quarterbacks. Sark wasn't even there, but he like gave a message to the sports information director to then just blurt out to the media at this press conference with other, I believe it was players that were there, and just blurt out to them, oh, by the way, Sark has a message for you guys. Quinn Ewers is the starter, which to me just indicated like, okay, we've got rumors flying. Too many people are running their mouth in Austin, and we have to get out in front of this. So I'm just going to tell the media right now, Quinn Ewers is the starter. Shut up about Hudson Card. This guy's great. He's going to be fine. Everything's, felt very much to me like the end of Animal House guy. Like, nothing to see here. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. I'm not even going to wait until my press conference to tell you this. I'm going to rush it out in awkward fashion because in true Texas fashion, we have another crazy rumor mill going out of control, and our season is already spiraling off the rails. So, to recap here, Texas has lost 2 starters to injury for the season. They had the Alabama kid also get suspended indefinitely, Alabama transfer wide receiver. And then apparently Hudson Card was out playing Quinn Ewers, and they had to rush to the altar an announcement that Quinn Ewers was going to be the starter. 5-7 watch, people. I'm telling you, it is a 5-7 watch in Austin right now. And I mean, I guess we can't really say that it's a warning until games start being played and lost by Texas, but feel like we're bordering as much as we possibly can on 5-7 warning time for the good old Texas Longhorns here. But yes, you guys know my thoughts on K-State as well too. They had the most all Big 12 players on the preseason team of anybody with 6. They should be considered a contender for the Big 12 title. Bry Guy 2724. What up, Bry Guy? He says, have you dove into Mandel's predictions much yet? You think it's all clickbait or a real prediction? Yeah, so obviously this dovetails pretty perfectly into the discussion that I was having there. Yes, I have seen them. And if you want the full rundown here, I'll go ahead and just give you the full rundown. He does predict K-State to win the Big 12 and go 10-2, 7-2 in the Big 12. So one takeaway here is that Mandel just thinks the entire league is going to beat up on each other. I was reading Athlon's preview magazine when I was on one of my flights this past week, and they had it kind of the same way. I believe they're Big 12 champ. I want to say it was Baylor, but I think they had them going 10-2 as well. So nobody from the playoff out of the Big 12. Mandel has K-State at 10-2, Baylor at 9-3, 6-3, Oklahoma State at 9-3, 6-3, Oklahoma, Iowa State, and West Virginia all at 7-5, 5-4. Texas Tech at 5-7, 4-5. Kansas at 4-8 with 3 Big 12 wins, 3-6. Texas and TCU tied for last in the Big 12 at 4-8 and 2-7. He has TCU listed last, so I assume that means he would have TCU losing their game against Texas to lose the de facto tiebreaker there and fall into last place in the Big 12. So there's a lot going on there, right? First of all, K-State to win the Big 12. Many people have said dark horse, and it seemed like there was a lot of buzz towards that. And then K-State wasn't ranked in either of the preseason top 25 polls, so that's still a pretty bold prediction. To have Oklahoma going 7-5, that's a pretty bold prediction. To have Kansas going 4-8, and not just that, but winning 3 conference games, it's a very bold prediction. To have Texas going 4-8 and 2-7, that's really not as bold a prediction as you might think, considering Texas 3 of the last 7 years has finished below 500. If you took the name Texas away from that and you threw it to another team that has finished under 500 3 times in the last 7 years and put them there in the conference, that would not draw nearly the reaction that it does. But it does, because we got Texas out here picking up stray first place votes nationally. They got a national first place vote at one point in time here. And that, I mean, it's just, all of this is peak Texas offseason. We have somebody predicting them to go 4-8, and we have a first place vote in a legitimate poll for them to be the national champion. There is Texas football. I guess it's entertaining. I guess it's funny, but I am a little flabbergasted with that, and frankly, a little bit tired of Texas by this point. I just need to see them go out and lose some games. Get Alabama into Austin and just have that bleep kicking commence so that we can just get that over with and get into the college football season. I feel like the college football season does not officially start until that happens. Okay, if you want to donate and get your question or comment in here, you got about 10 minutes, maybe a little under 10 minutes if you want. So this is like a 7-8 minute warning. If you've got a question or comment that has not been addressed here and you want to make sure that that gets on the show, click the $ below the chat box where it says say something. That is how you do that. Boom to the Sooner. My fault. I was scrolling too fast here and I missed it for a second. Boom to the Sooner. Thank you for being here as always. Thank you for your question. Boom to the Sooner says, if the Pac-12 falls apart, what is the best case scenario for the Big 12 after Pac-12 demolition? Well, best case, I think, starts with at least 3 of the 4 corner schools. I'll be honest, I'm torn on if you're going to only add 4 schools total. I'm torn on, do you get San Diego State? Do you get Utah? And I realize Utah fans would freak out hearing that right now. But again, it's about market. You're already into Utah with BYU. SoCal does have a lot of value, even if it's just a teeny tiny piece of it with San Diego State. It's hard, though, to pass up what Utah is as an actual football program now. And if you're talking about getting teams into whatever an expanded playoff would look like eventually, it is hard to pass up on Utah because I give them respect as a program. Like, I think they would bring a lot of juice there. Now, my question would also be, is it the head coach? Is that going to be a thing long term? We'll have to see. But right now, there should be a lot of respect granted to Utah as a football program. So, I mean, it starts with that. 3 or 4 of the 4 corner schools, maybe San Diego State, maybe not. But the ultimate best case scenario is just that you become conference number 3 and everybody else falls off. I mean, the ultimate best case would be Big Ten decides to expand. They blow up the Pac-12. You take those schools. Then, because of that, the SEC says, all right, let's lawyer up. Let's go fight the grant of rights in the ACC. Let's blow that thing up. Or the speculation that's been out there about the ACC could have schools leaving for the SEC and then schools that want a life raft to the Big 12. And they all just say, we'll come together, all leave at the same time, dissolve the conference, bada bing, bada boom. Some scenario like that plays out, and then you can scoop up basically just the best of the rest in all of college football. Like that is the best case scenario for the Big 12 right now, that you become the home for everybody not in the Big Ten or the SEC. So that's really where it's at right now. I think that boom to the Sooner is the situation. Appreciate you being here. And again, I apologize for being a little bit late getting to that. Okay. Robert, appreciate the donation. Robert says, all Big 12 fans have schadenfreude, the Pac-12. Their arrogance. See Colorado's JUCO League remark. Take the kill shot, Big 12, wreck them. Yeah, I mean, I pretty much agree, Robert. I do. I mean, there's clearly an arrogance from the Pac-12. Even in, Wilner, who speculated about, hey, could the Pac-12 still raid the Big 12? And this was in response to a question he got, in fairness, on Twitter. But even within all of that, right, there seems to be a little bit of arrogance. And he adds at the end of it that would Pac-12, let me get the direct quote here. He says, would Pac-12 presidents ever do something this bold? I think we all know the answer to that. That's what I mean. He doesn't have the arrogance. He's pointing out like the Pac-12 presidents even still might just be too arrogant here to even bring themselves to go add Big 12 schools, even if they could pull off some kind of crazy raid like that. So yeah, there's plenty of that. There's plenty of that in Pac-12 country right now. And speaking of that for Wilner, so this is what somebody had asked, like basically said, Big 12 exit fees would prevent any kind of expansion for the Pac-12 into Big 12 country from happening. And he said, no, that's not necessarily the case, because currently in negotiations, the Pac-12 could go to the 6 most valuable Big 12 schools with a long-term deal, and then get 6 of those schools plus Texas and Oklahoma to vote to dissolve the conference, which equals no exit fees. Pac-12 20, the Pac-20 rather includes BYU, Houston, San Diego State, one more. Insulation from second Big 10 raid equals goodbye. Big 12 exit fees mean everything or nothing. So what he is saying there, because it's a lot of shorthand on Twitter thanks to the character limit, is that the Pac-12 would go take the 6 most valuable schools. They would then vote along with Texas and Oklahoma to dissolve the conference. And his point there would be exit fees don't mean anything. Many people have pointed out, brought up the Big 12 bylaws. I don't believe that to be totally accurate. Now, I say this with the caveat that I am no lawyer, and that even with what seemed to be a pretty ironclad ACC grant of rights, there were plenty of people speculating and saying, like, maybe that could actually still blow up at some point after the fact, that may not be all that ironclad. So because of all that, I'm just admitting, like, I'm just a dude who used to be a sports reporter, radio host, who has a YouTube show. I don't know law. Okay. But if you read through this, and I'm not going to even bother reading the actual, you can see it on Twitter. Our web, which is at BUSAF95 on Twitter. He tweeted it at me earlier today. Shout out to our web. If you want to go see it, you can. The best summary I can give you of this is basically the Big 12 in its bylaws has covered that, like, if you straight up try to dodge the exit fees and grant of rights, or there's evidence that you have intent to try and dodge that and plot something, it won't fly. You're going to have to pay it. Like, it'll be stopped. It would at least be deemed illegal under the bylaws. And then there's also a part in there that talks about if a third party tries to induce you to bail on the grant of rights or exit fees, you're required to give notice of that to the conference within 12 hours and reject that offer in a manner acceptable to the commissioner. So those are laid out in the bylaws. And that was the response a lot of people had immediately to Wilner, like, hey dude, this can't really happen. Now, that I agree. That seems like that wouldn't be the case. But again, I thought the ACC's thing was totally done and nobody could touch it. And depending on who you ask, it feels like there may be some wiggle room there. And I understand the ACC's deal is different. And I know our web pointed out to me somebody that I need to go read some of his work on the ACC deal. I get it. Totally get it. Just pointing that out. But even beyond all of that, let's take that aside. Like, say you could possibly get out of the exit fees, right? Why is a Big 12 team going to want to go leave for a less stable conference with less regional rivalries for a very similar amount of money? I mean, you're not going to be making crazy amounts more money, if any at all, if you go to that league and form the Pac-20. And then you just know within a couple of years, you're going to lose the 2 to 4 best brands in the conference. And then you're going to be back to losing money, losing stability, and everything back in flux again. There's just, the Big 12 is in a better position of stability because of that. No one's going to give that up and cough that up. It's basically the same kind of argument that Wilner is using right now, and those of the Pac-12 are using right now for why the four corner schools wouldn't leave. Similar money and have to uproot your rivalries and all that. Why would you do it? I mean, it'd be the same thing for the Big 12. Plus, they have the added advantage of more stability in the current league that they're in. So I I don't see that being very plausible at all. Boom to the Sooner. Thank you for another donation. Boom to the Sooner says, if it becomes clear that there are 4 conferences left, does the ACC start going after every decent program left after the Big 12 takes who it wants? Maybe, I don't know. We haven't heard a ton about the ACC being super aggressive. Again, we're talking about dilutive versus additive. The idea here being, I think in this scenario for you would be like they're just going to try and kill off the Big 12, like preemptively kill it off. Maybe they would have some success there, but once again, you're looking at it if you're a Big 12 school, like, hey man, Clemson, Florida State, Miami, they're going to be gone at some point. Like, we know the flirtation is there with the SEC. We know that even like North Carolina and Virginia, there have been talks about the Big Ten, that being a fit there. We know that there's a lot of flirting going around there, and there's not really a lot of stability at that point. And would you be making more money there? Their TV contract is not very good right now. Much in line with the Big 12 and Pac-12, if not going to be worse in another couple of years. So it just, to me, I don't think that they would have a lot of success doing that. They're certainly not going to lure anybody out of the Big Ten or the SEC, which is what would really matter anyway. So I don't think the ACC is really in a great power position to do any of that either. Gregory, thank you for the donation, Gregory. Gregory says, does the Big 12 stop at 16 teams before the ACC grant of right expires, or do we get to 18 or 20? I would have a hard time. That's what I feel pretty strongly about. I'd have a hard time seeing anything over 16 for sure, unless it's including ACC schools. Like, I think at that point, if you're going beyond that, you're talking about becoming the best of the rest conference and scooping up everything else from everybody that's there. I would not foresee that happening. And some people have said, like, hey, did the Big 12 mess up by adding 4? Should they have just added 2, and then you'd have a better chance to add 4 schools right now from the Pac-12 and not be dilutive? There have already been people questioning that. I don't really question that so much. I think the Big 12 did what it had to do at the time last year. What I would question is if you went beyond 16 right now and it's like adding Memphis, Boise State, whoever. No, at that point, you got to stand pat at 16, wait and see what happens with the ACC, and then maybe become the best of the rest conference. Alan, thank you for the donation, Alan. Alan says, John, thanks for being the voice of the Big 12. Keep it up. Hope to see you for cocktails at the Sunflower Showdown this year. Rock Chalk Jayhawk. Man, I'm getting some KU love today. I appreciate you guys. Thank you, Alan. Certainly, man, hit me up. I'm trying. So the Sunflower Showdown, that's in Manhattan this year. If you come to Manhattan, you let me know. We'll make it happen. Maybe we can do a little, do a little K-State KU tailgate or something. All my Kansas fans in here that at least have some level of appreciation for me. Thank you for that. Thank you. And look, let me clarify some comments that I made on Twitter yesterday. I do think, and this was when I saw, it was a list. I think it was Mike Farrell from Rivals who had a list of the best coaches in the Big 12. He had Lance Leipold at number 4. I think Leipold's a good coach, but I think there is an element of, one, everybody rooting for Kansas to be better, because if you don't have an association to the rivalry, of course you want to see the little guy win. You want to see the upset. You want to see the story. But also I think it's more like Kansas has had such wretched football and just such terrible coaches. I mean, legitimately, it's Kansas gets a football coach in who can walk and chew gum at the same time, and it feels a little bit like an overreaction because you've just seen so much awful there. I compared it to, you're stranded in the desert, because again, today is the show of analogies. You are stranded in the desert. You have not eaten in 4 days. You then get handed a McDouble from McDonald's. You eat it and proclaim it to be the greatest piece of meat you've ever eaten in your life, ignoring all the amazing steaks that you've had at Ruth Chris or the fancy steakhouse, whatever. That's what it is to me. Like, Lance Leipold may be an excellent coach, but I think he had a season last year that has been replicated, at least in terms of the pure wins and losses, by every other preceding Kansas coach before him that we all make fun of. Weiss, Turner Gill, etc. He still has a lot to prove there. His recruiting has not, Les Miles recruited better than Lance Leipold did. Having said all of that, I think he's clearly a much more organized, like, legitimate football coach. Like, that's a guy that legitimately knows how to coach the game of football, as opposed to just being a total, I got to be careful what I say. Les Miles was a train wreck, a freaking train wreck. And so especially being held right up in the light next to him, who was just immediately there, I just think there's this like rush to anoint, like, oh, look, Kansas didn't hire a complete idiot this time. So clearly 2 years after being the worst program in college football, they're going to go win 7 games. No, there are some baby steps I think that would need to happen, even if he is the legitimate real deal here for Kansas. So I'm just pumping the brakes a little bit. Now, you want to be like Stuart Mandel and say 4-8, 3 wins in the league. I still feel like that's a bit lofty, but that's not crazy. But, any talk here, as a Kansas fan tweeting out there today, like, 3 Big 12 wins is the floor. Okay, let's chill out, because there's just a lot of work that needs to be done to that program. Even Lance Leipold can be as good as you want him to be. There's just some work that's going to have to be done to the program. Bill Snyder, who I would argue is one of the top 5 or 10 greatest college football coaches of all time. His second year at K-State, after taking over the worst program in college football history, he won 5 games. 5 games in year 2 for Bill Snyder. And that is, again, like the greatest turnaround artist in college football history. 5 in year 2. Similar situation at Kansas, couple wins last year. I think 3 or 4 would be a really nice positive step for Kansas, and I think that's definitely within the realm of possibility. But let's stop short of putting them in a bowl next year. Okay, been talking for over an hour. Much love to all you guys for being here. Thank you, as always. Should be back on a regular schedule now, man. And then next week, guys, like we're into football mode. We're into football mode, like legitimate game week. And I guess you could say that this week right now, because we have week 0. We got a little Nebraska Northwestern going on Saturday. I didn't think about that. The next time I talk to you, 2 things will have happened by the next time I talk to you. 1, we will have watched actual college football being played this year. And 2, I will be a year older because my birthday is on Friday. Okay. So if you'd like to celebrate my birthday on Friday, of course, my 23rd birthday, as you can see, still in my early 20s, 23rd birthday coming up on Friday. You can celebrate that by hitting me up on Twitter at JL Kurtz. Pretty responsive in the DMs. Or hey, throw this out there. John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo. Shameless. But my birthday is on Friday. I appreciate all of you guys. Thank you for being here. Thank you for making this community, this channel so special. Tell your friends about it. Post about it. Facebook, if you have Facebook groups with other fans, other Big 12 fans, other fans of your school, Twitter, Instagram, whatever it is, word of mouth. Spread the word. Let's continue to grow this thing and get ready for some Big 12 football, guys. Have a great rest of your night. Have a great rest of your week. Thank you, Zach. I see Zach getting in with a donation late. Zach Jones, much love, my man. Thank you for the sticker, and thank you for the donation. Take care, guys, and I will talk to you soon.